Hi everybody. So we're going to look at a little additional presentation here to the binaural mixdown I did the other day, and there's a couple of things you need to check in that project that's in the studio to make sure everything's routed correctly. So today we're just going to mix spatially into binaural, but we're going to start with 64 channel ambisonics. So I know that sounds kind of complicated. Let's put this down. Excuse me. So really what we're doing is we're bringing in these multi-tracks. A lot of them are mono. The occasional track is stereo, like a synth track, something like that. And then they're being kind of upmixed or spread out into 64 channel ambisonics. You might ask, like, why 64 channel ambisonics and not 4 channel first order ambisonics like we were dealing with in the lectures. And we demonstrated the microphones and things, but the big difference between 4 channel and 64 channel is the amount of resolution you get. So we're working virtually, which means that you get as much, you can make as many ambisonic channels as you want. So for that reason we opted for 64 channel ambisonics. If you take a quick look here, you can see on this website, here's the actual Eigen microphone. This is the EM64, which, as you can see, has 64 capsules spread around a sphere. So that's the type of microphone you would use for 64 channel ambisonics. So this is the level of precision you're dealing with. You can tell, you just get a much more accurate picture of the 3D sound sphere with 64 channels than you would with 4 channels. So that's the main rationale for using 64 channels. So, but the tracks themselves are then simply placed somewhere in that 64 channel sphere. And then, since we don't have like any kind of 3D playback with overhead speakers like we were talking about in the lectures, we're just going to decode for this session here to ambisonics, which is why I'm wearing headphones, and I'm going to use the binaural decoder to decode it, and that should work out quite well. There shouldn't be a problem, hopefully. The song here is called Nuvole, and it's by a group called Guarana. If you check them out, they're Italian, and they actually have lots of hits. You know, they're popular music, you know, kind of contemporary pop, modern sort of pop stuff. Very well mixed and very well produced. So, you know, sometimes with these sorts of things, I know this it's very commercial sounding, but sometimes with these things, you want something that's very clean and stylized, because it's easier to get a feel for what the plugins are doing if you've got a very clean source, and then you can move on and use it for other stuff once you have your templates set up. But so you can substitute tracks then once the template's set up. You can kind of use the same project for different types of multi-tracks, you know. So that would be the concept of what we're doing. Now, key to all this is setting up all of the kind of routing and all of the groups correctly together. That's kind of important. So I'll just playing this back now. You can hear, hopefully hear, if you're listening on headphones, and you should be, you hopefully hear that everything is distributed spatially right now. We're even getting overhead stuff, and we looked at the energy distribution plugin. So if we go Command M in Reaper and then pull up our energy visualizer, you can actually see the stuff coming from overhead and from underneath. Now, before you do anything else, of course, the first thing you need to do with the tracks, because when you drag these multi-tracks into Reaper, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to make them into either mono or stereo tracks depending upon the track coming in. And if it's like a vocal take or the bass guitar or something like that, then, or a drum, there's a really good chance it's going to be a mono track, and it'll end up being a mono track going to stereo. That would be the default in any DAW. If it's a stereo track, you'll have a stereo track going to stereo, like stereo keyboards, for example. Most keyboard players have a left and right out, and they record the tracks in stereo, or their takes in stereo. Okay, so that's kind of common sense enough. This is kind of like band 101, really. So, but that's no good for 64-channel ambisonics. You need to be ready to use. We're using now the IEM plugin stereo encoder, and what that does is it'll encode that mono or stereo track into ambisonics. So it'll make it so that you can place it anywhere in the 3D sphere, anywhere on the horizon or behind you, or even anywhere over your head or underneath you. Now, if you had a sphere of speakers, then you would actually hear that as you move that panel around. You'd hear it go over your head and then underneath your feet. You'd hear those sorts of effects. But we're mixing in binaural, so you don't really you get some of the effect. You don't get the entire, it's not quite as convincing, but it's pretty good actually. You do definitely hear it going over above your head and underneath. So we'll just zoom in this plug-in and have a quick look at it. So obviously you can pan around left, right, to the front, to the back, and it'll appear as if it's kind of doing things back and forth. You can also mess with the elevation. Now the elevation is actually whether it's over or under you, and you can see the little puck there changing as you go underneath. So the elevation is now underneath you. So you're going to imagine this not as a circle, but as a sphere. So that's how this stereo encoder works. So basically you're taking a mono track and you're applying these cues to it that make it seem like it's either over your head, under your head, behind you, in front of you. The spatial cues, by employing what we talked about before, the head related transfer functions, or HRTFs, that's how this is done basically. Then you bust this all out down the line here to the very end. Now I have it going to a couple of places here, because remember we also wanted to go to a loudspeaker array, but we're not using that today, so we can mute that. But what we are using is a bus with a binaural decoder. Now you might remember I like to keep things, to separate things out, because I like to see what I'm have a bus for each function. It's kind of the way I work. You can work other ways if you want, as long as you don't get confused, that is. But I find this not confusing, because if I'm using this one, which is the quad speaker array we were using the other day, then it's kind of obvious that goes straight over to here, and then there shouldn't be any problem. If I want to use binaural, I need to go through an additional bus here, which is this one, which has the binaural decoder on it, which actually seems to be, wait a minute, there, is this IEM again plugin here. So the IEM plugins are really good for this stuff. I mean, I gotta say, I'm very impressed with what they are, and they don't cost anything either, which doesn't hurt at all. I'm sure you'll agree. Now there's one thing that might not be set up here. So there's a couple of ways. If it's in auto, then it'll automatically switch to 7th order, because it sees 64 tracks, because we set up 64 tracks on each of those tracks. But if you don't have it set up that way from the beginning, then it might default to one of the other ambisonic orders. So you want to be in 7th order ambisonics, because that's the resolution we're working with here today. Now just remember, it's a virtual resolution. We're never actually using 64 microphones, nor did Guarana use them in the recording. Or Guarna, sorry. So the 64 channels from the track, the bus with the energy visualizer, which is just there to see what's going on actually, but it's very useful. Then that goes, everything goes into that, and then all 64 channels of that go out to the binaural decoder, which accepts 64 in, because 7th order ambisonics is 64, and then outputs stereo, because binaural audio is stereo. It's not stereo, it's 2-channel, left and right. It's not the same as stereo, just so you know. Okay, so that's that. The one in the studio might have a bit of an issue, so you need to kind of like fix that up. The way you can tell that everything's going through the binaural decoder is if you mute it. If you mute it and hear nothing, then you know that it's set up correctly. Because now you know, you can see everything coming through to this bus, but if you mute it here, then you know that everything is going to the through the binaural processor, which it has to do to be processed binaurally. It doesn't work otherwise. You'll still hear stuff, but it just won't be processed binaurally. That's the snag. So for the setup of the actual tracks, so you can see I've got like we did some assignment work here, so we put all of the drums into a drum bus. The bass is there. Is just going straight. The bass and all these acoustic guitar and piano and synths, they're all just going through this ambisonics bus. There's a Vox bus. There's 2 Vox buses. So for vocals, there's bus 1 and bus 2, and then there's a bunch of vocals on one bus and another bunch of vocals on another bus. I think it's because they come in at different times. I split them up into 2 so that they could be panned at different places around the sphere, which hopefully would give some sort of like, you know, immersive choral sort of effect, maybe, you know, like these choirs in different spots of a cathedral or something like that. We're going beyond doing stereo mixing here, and we want to do something exciting, you see. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is just check those tracks. Now, I set all these up pretty much the same, so it is kind of a pain if you're dealing with a lot of tracks, because you have to bring them all in and then go and change these from 1-2, they'll usually be stereo, and then change them to 64 track channels, so that the binaural, so that the ambisonics processing can take place. So this is the root button, of course, which we made a big fuss about the other day, and you can just click on that and you can see for each of those that it's done. There's other ways of doing it. Of course, you could make tracks and then make them all 64 and then copy them within Reaper and then bring in the multitracks, and then that would maybe save, since you're able to copy tracks with the 64 channel count on each one. But then, of course, you have to type in the name of the multi-track on each one. I don't know which takes longer, like, you know, that is whether it's hi-hats or claps or snare or something like that. So I don't know, it depends which takes longer. I think either way it's going to take a while. So once you get into this stuff, so account for that when you're working on your projects. So I actually thought of something we could do with the drum bus. There is like the kick and the snare, and then there's like all of these frilly things. I thought it might be nice to separate those out and make like the claps, hats, put them in a different space than the kick and the snare. The kick, I think, might be nice along with the bass in its own space, and down low in the energy diagram. So by placing the bass down here, so if I want to put these down low, I get this up with the energy visualizer. You need to put these on the edge so you can get at them again. So it's pretty annoying, this. Okay, so I got both of them now. Bass, okay, good. Let's get this out of the way. Oh, well, that's already down there, so I already did that, so that's good. I think it might be nice to put the kick down there as well for consistency. So I want to move this kick out of there over to here. Now that's off somewhere else right now. which is probably not the best practice for kick. So I'm giving a little space between those two, so you get an idea that they're slightly separated, but both coming from underneath you. So in my headphones anyway, right now, it does actually sound like those are coming from underneath me, which I think is kind of cool, actually. So if I get this one now, now that's on the drum bus. So if I just solo the drum bus, you can see that I've got it's much easier to hear the cues with high frequency content. You can really hear that. Sounds like it's coming from behind me. And then back over here. And you can even spread it out a bit if you want, to make a kind of focused frontal image. Okay, so far so good. Now let's do a little work on those vocals, because they seem to be getting a little lost. That seems to be the main one right there. We must have turned those down, so. So that's the vocal bus there for that lead vocal. Okay, to my ears sounds a lot better if you stereoize that bus. So actually what had obviously happened there was the bus had gone from, it was originally stereo and had gotten down mixed or just squished in by this plugin, which kind of solidifies everything into a little kind of central puck. But if you use the width control, you can spread them out a tiny bit and get this sort of nice effect, and you can tweak them so that they're even. You can see that there, so left right balance. So let's check that out. So the norm for this would be to keep that kind of focused and in the center of the mix, whereas like things like backing vocals and things, you would kind of like fluff them out a bit. Of course, you can do this with panning, or you can do it with microphone techniques. And of course, you might remember me talking ages ago, back in second year, about the Bruce Sweden technique. He worked on the Michael Jackson albums, did Bruce, and he had this great technique for recording backing vocals using a pair of crossed eights, you know, figure eights, and then he would make the backing vocalists stand in a circle around the mics, and you just got this really beautiful spatialized sound that sounded great, but it didn't interfere or conflict with the main vocal, which is a good thing to be doing if you're working with artists of the caliber of Michael Jackson, or any singer who's worth their salt, and you know, there's usually a big personality going along with those singers. So let's check this out in the mix now. Little bit of tweaking there.
mi innamoro sempre, sai che no, non c'è un qualcosa che mi porti dentro me, in queste nuvole, e anche se mi innamoro sempre, sai che no.
Okay, so far so good.
Anche se mi innamoro.
It sounds like a lot coming from the left and not so much from the right, which is a bit weird, and I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe this.
Anche se mi innamoro sempre, sai che no, non c'è un qualcosa che mi porti dentro me, in queste nuvole, e anche se mi innamoro sempre, sai che no, non c'è un qualcosa che mi porti dentro me, in queste nuvole, se non mi parli e non mi guardi.
Oh, I think what's going on is that metering is just distracting, because that's like a stereo meter and it really doesn't have anything to do with what's coming out, because we're actually, right now, we're panning around a 64-channel ambisonic sphere in virtual space. So I probably would ignore those and go with your ears more, would be my advice there. I think that's what's happening there. Okay, let's work on these backing vocals.
Se non mi parli e non mi guardi, sai che mi cambi il mood, ma non mi importa più, no, non mi importa più di vedermi perso dentro questa mia TV. Dove finisco io, dove finisci tu? Bevo il mondo in pillole, ma rimangono briciole, e prima o poi risale.
Now I would have sworn I was coming from... No, actually no, that's just where I heard it. It was coming from behind me. Yeah. Cool. So that's what I want. I want it, I just don't want, I want it anywhere except competing with the lead vocal, basically, in this case.
Se non mi parli e non mi guardi, sai che mi cambio. Anche se mi innamoro sempre, sai che no, non c'è un qualcosa che mi porti dentro me, in queste nuvole, e anche se mi innamoro sempre, sai che no, non c'è un qualcosa che mi porti dentro me, in queste nuvole. Se non mi parli e non mi guardi, sai che mi cambi il mood, ma non mi importa più, no, non mi importa.
So little things need to be trimmed here and there as we go. You could automate some of these things, but I'm just setting basic levels for now.
Dove finisci tu? Bevo il mondo in pillole, ma rimangono briciole, e prima o poi risale, e mi ritrovo
I think
spesso.
that some of the stuff on that track, the backing, is sometimes louder than other bits, so you'd have to go through that and find the points that are louder and bring them down, perhaps.
Non ho riscritto più, anche se mi innamoro sempre, sai che no.
So I like this so far, that's cool. I won't really go any further with this. I just wanted to show you the signal flow and how to kind of set those panners. Of course you could automate the panners as well, which could be a lot more fun even to move things around. So one more, just to recap, how do you set these up? So you bring in your multi-tracks, and then you'll end up with either mono or stereo tracks, depending upon whether you're bringing in a mono or stereo track. The next thing is you have to go to every single track and use the routing with the little stripy button there, and then set them all to 64, which is a kind of a pain actually. So all 1 to 64, and then track channel 64, and then just send all of those like that. It says, you see where it says parent send, you can leave that on, but it assumes that you're going, I'm assuming that you're going into a bus. So what I have is every single track and every single submix here. So some of them are just going straight in as tracks, like the piano. I don't have the pianos and the synths grouped yet, but the drums are grouped. So all of these are all going through this big mix, this big sub mix called ambisonics. And that has I have placed that energy visualizer thing on there, so I can sort of tell when I'm panning stuff around, either from channels or from subgroups or submixes, where they're ending up in the 3D sphere. Finally, I'm taking the output of that and I made a send to another bus that I've created here, which is the binaural decoder bus. Everything's 64 channels till you get to this bus. This bus decodes it from 64 channel ambisonics to 2 channel binaural, and then that's routed out. That ends up going out to the master send. Now the big difference between this bus and all of the other buses is that this has 64 channels, and you need that because what's coming into the binaural decoder is 64 channel ambisonics, but what's exiting is 2 channel. So I have the send channels down to 2 because that's all you need. There's a left ear and a right ear. It's 2 channels for binaural, and then the final I go master send channels will end up porting it over to the main mix, or what Reaper calls the master mix, over here. And then you can see I have my output 1 and 2 there, which is your hardware outputs. So you don't really get hardware outputs till you get to the very end in Reaper, and the hardware outputs are set up here, and then that feeds directly to your audio interface, and you get the send to the headphones from that. We won't talk about the 4 channel submixing because that's done in a different project. Now the sending it around quad like we did the other day is quite different than doing binaural mixes in a sphere, because quad, of course, you don't get the sphere, you don't get overhead, and you don't get underneath, but in binaural you do. So in some ways, at least for the person listening to it, if not for anybody else around you, the binaural mix is really good for spatial stuff, because you do get the effect of being inside a sort of spherical 3D sound environment, whereas on quad it can spin around you, but it's all in the horizontal plane. So the panners are quite different. As we looked at we're using the re-surround pan, and it's a different kettle of fish really. And yeah, so we look at that either in this project modified or in a different project. But anyway, that's how you set up non-spatialized tracks to be mixed out to a sort of spatial audio format like binaural. And we're using all those free plugins. There's nothing in this session that you can't get for free, and Reaper will pretty much run on any computer. So there's nothing stopping anybody from realizing this, and I think almost everybody has headphones. So it's an incredibly democratic platform in a way. Yeah, there's a lot you can do, and sonically there is no difference between this and any of the ones that you pay for. Actually, it's very, very good indeed. So that's kind of it. I'll just leave it at that. Thanks very much. Keep an eye out for any other videos that we might make. So now you see with the energy visualizer with the full mix, we've got stuff underneath, got stuff overhead and then some stuff behind us. Could go even further with all the synth tracks and things. I mean, this isn't far from fully mixed yet, but you do get the idea. And of course, it doesn't have to be such commercial content. It can be something quite experimental that you work with it as well. But the same principles will hold pretty much. Okay, this is nice now. I'm actually hearing this behind my... it really works. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care.